So the reason they're getting interference, I believe, is because there's a huge energy influx in the atmosphere that's interfering with their transmissions.
All right, that's Dutch Since. He's been on top of things. His videos, you can find him up at our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/First Contact Radio. Let me make sure I'm on the playlist for today. And you'll be able to, when the show's over, I'll have everything posted up there. Where are we going to go now? Let me jump to this one here. We haven't talked about Fukushima in a while, but they are still having major problems over there, and we still need to be sending our prayers. Here's something that's going on. They think that there's a nuclear collapse shortly. Let's hear.
Now, a small group of evacuees have briefly been allowed inside the exclusion zone around Japan's damaged Fukushima nuclear plant. For the first time, the government gave permission for short visits so people could gather belongings and check on their properties. Meanwhile, a recent map of contamination released by Japan shows high levels of radiation well outside the evacuation zone. Well, Dr. Robert Jacobs can help shed more light on all this. He's a research associate professor of nuclear history and culture at the Hiroshima Peace Institute. Dr. Jacobs, many thanks for being with us now. If radiation is high even beyond the zone, how can it now be safe to be letting people get closer?
It's not safe. This is a situation where they're letting the people go in one time in order to remove articles from their home, typically a designated person in a family. So that person will certainly have some exposure during that time. It shouldn't be sufficient in a period of going in for a few hours and leaving to be very threatening to their health, but the real threat is to the people who live in the contaminated areas outside of the exclusion zone. And it's now clear, there have been, for 2 months now, there have been measurements of high levels of radiation outside of the exclusion zone. And as we've heard, high levels present in the schools in the voluntary evacuation zone from 20 to 30 kilometers. And just this week, also, radioactive sludge turned up in the sewage system of one of the nearby cities. So in just a period of less than 2 months, the groundwater contamination has been sufficient to enter into the sewage system of a nearby town. So clearly the levels outside of the zone are fairly high in some areas.
Let's talk about some of the ambiguity still surrounding radiation levels. Those levels detected by workers inside the damaged reactor show that it is much higher than they expected. So why aren't we getting more accurate readings since we're 2 months into the crisis now?
Well, this is a reflection of the incredibly small amount of information that even TEPCO and the Japanese government are operating with. Just in the last day or two, the government entered for the first time since the accident happened, entered into reactor number 1, and the idea was that they were going to vent out the radiation that was contained in the building and begin to install a new cooling system. But once they entered into the building, they found that the levels inside were so high that it became impossible to work there. They're now at such a high level that one worker working for 10 minutes will receive a lifetime dose of exposure. So clearly, TEPCO and the government are still in the process of just beginning to learn what are the current conditions. So it's very hard to solve these problems when you don't really know what the sources of the radiation are.
All right, so you can hear from that there's a lot of problems. Again, you can go find this. This will be on our YouTube channel when the show is over. Make sure everything's posted up there. Seems almost less important, but federal spy chips to hijack your phone. The announcement that Americans are set to be bombarded with mandatory government propaganda via their cell phones represents a shocking lurch forward in the Obama administration's bid to launch a total takeover of all communications as part of a wider move towards controlling the Internet, developing an omnipresent wiretap system and creating a constant environment of suspicion and distrust by enlisting citizens to spy on each other. You see, they say Osama bin Laden was the big terrorist. He's not the big terrorist. The big terrorist is in Washington, D.C. It's the very government of this country. That's the terrorist. That's the problem. They want to expand and they want to be involved everywhere in your life. None of that is absolutely necessary. at all. But it's going to take Americans, millions of them standing up. Remember, there's 300 million Americans who are not part of the government or military, and there's about 8 million that are part of the military and the government and all their cronies and so on and so forth. 300 million, 8 million. Which is a bigger number? Many of you kids out there, if you're listening to the show, I know that school isn't really teaching you what you need to know, but 300 million is a bigger number than 8 million. Therefore, this 300 million could actually surround the 8 million many, many, many times over and keep them from operating and doing all the corrupt things they're doing. But in order for that to happen, it requires you standing up. It requires Americans to step up and put aside their apathetic ways. Is that going to happen? I'd like to think that it could. I know you'd all like to believe that it could. But Americans have gotten too fat, dumb, and lazy. That's just the reality of the situation. I'm sure that you can see that out where you live as well. So I'm not speaking critical of anybody. I'm just stating a fact. Americans need to get off the couch, and they need to get out, and they need to take some action. They need to speak up. They need to do something other than just sitting and being an observer. Because sitting and being an observer isn't getting the job done. Now, I'm going to jump over here. Where are we going to go here? I wanted to play something else over here. This was on the BBC. You can hear them, the skepticism over Osama bin Laden and his. Let's see what we got here. Is this going to play? Alright, maybe not. Again, you've got skepticism over there saying that this isn't him. This was one guy saying this was my friend. I know who he is. He's my neighbor. So what others? I had some other stuff here. What else we got for you? Let's listen to what Ron Paul has to say. We haven't heard from him in a while.
Last week marked an important milestone in the war on terrorism for our country. 10 years ago, Osama bin Laden applauded the 9/11 attacks. Such deliberate killing of innocent lives deserved retaliation. It is good that bin Laden is dead and justice is served. The way in which he was finally captured and killed shows that targeted retribution is far superior to wars of aggression and nation building. In 2001, I supported giving the President the authority to pursue those responsible for the vicious 9/11 attacks. However, misusing that authority to pursue nation building and remaking the Middle East was cynical and dangerous, as the past 10 years have proven. It is tragic that it took 10 years, trillions of dollars, tens of thousands of American casualties, and many thousands of innocent lives to achieve our mission of killing one evil person. A narrow, targeted mission under these circumstances was far superior to initiating wars against countries not involved in the 9/11 attacks, and that is all we should have done. This was the reason I emphasized at the time the principle of mark and reprisal permitted to us by the U.S. Constitution for difficult missions such as we faced. I'm convinced that this approach would have achieved our goal much sooner and much cheaper. The elimination of Osama bin Laden should now prompt us to declare victory and bring our troops home from Afghanistan and Iraq. Al-Qaeda was never in Iraq, and we were supposedly in Afghanistan to get Osama bin Laden. With bin Laden gone, there is no reason for our presence in the region, unless indeed it was all about oil, nation building, and remaking the Middle East and Central Asia. Hopefully bin Laden does not get the last laugh. He claimed the 9/11 attacks were designed to get the U.S. to spread its military dangerously and excessively throughout the Middle East, bankrupting us through excessive military spending, as he did the Soviets, and to cause political dissension within the United States. Some 70% of Americans now believe we should leave Afghanistan, yet both parties seem determined to stay.
All right, so we're going to end right there. A little disappointed, I got to tell you, to hear Ron Paul kind of support the whole bin Laden thing that happened, because it didn't happen. You know, that was truly a fake. Don't take my word for it. Do some searching, and you will find stories about bin Laden's death, going all the way back to 2001, and you'll find that he's been pronounced dead about 9 times. The man had a kidney problem. He was on dialysis machines. I know there are those who say he had more money, he could buy a new kidney if he needed to. But we all hear stories of people that have money and they can't get the kidneys and the things that they need. It might not have been a possibility. Maybe it's ran the course of how it could go for him to get another kidney. He was a sick man back in 2001. Physically, he's been reported dead 9 times. Congress and Washington are just lying to you. They're not being honest about what really is going on with that situation, and that's just too bad. But they're leading you into a war. They're leading you into a problem. This is where you, as Americans, now need to put on your common sense. You can continue to watch the news, the mainstream news, and take it for face value of what they're saying. Or you can go and do some research for yourself, and you can find out that there are alternative stories to what they are saying. And the funny thing is, and I don't know if it's really funny, but the thing about the situation is, once you understand what the game plan is and what they're trying to accomplish, as you start watching the mainstream news, you begin to see it in a different way, and it starts to unfold like they're unfolding a script. You watch. You watch what's going to happen. They're going to continue to downplay what's going on in the Midwest. There's going to continue to be these weather patterns, like Dutch Sense and others are pointing out. There's going to be more rain and more crazy weather in the Midwest, which is going to soak the area. They're probably going to blow up another levee or two along the way because they say it needs to happen. And ultimately, it's going to lead to an earthquake. You're going to hear a lot more threats that are going to go on given from outside this country in, and you're going to be hearing over and over and over that there's going to be a terrorist attack. They've already pointed things out, and they're making references to Chicago and the trains in Chicago, and they've got extra security on the trains now, and they're talking about nuclear issues. And you watch. You just start to watch and pay attention. Start to pay attention how, I was a bit loud there. Pay attention to what they're doing, and you'll start to see it makes a whole different amount of sense if you pay attention. Okay? Now, let's just take the last few minutes here, my friends. Close your eyes. I want you to think positive about today. I want you to think about today and what it is that you have ahead of you. I want you to think about today and think about all of the challenges that you have to face, all of the questions you need to answer. And I want you just simply to imagine that you are moving through this day smoothly and easily. Whatever the challenges are, you work through them, you move through them. Whatever the doubts and fears, you address them with love. And whatever the problems, you're able to get control of them and figure them out. I want you to take a moment, send light and love to everyone around the planet right now. Even though you can't see their faces, just imagine sending love and light. Think positive thoughts for the world. Send this love down to the planet. And now bring that love back to you. And just go out into the world today, my friends. Do something good. Share some love with some others. Spread positive messages. We're all in this together. We can make a difference. We just have to keep doing so. For Dirk Bradshaw, my name's Josh Poet. It's been a pleasure as always. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Peace out.